Picture a scenario that, well, you might actually know all too well. On paper, everything in this relationship, or maybe a workplace dynamic, it just looks absolutely flawless.
Right, like perfectly curated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your boss is hailed industry-wide as this visionary mentor, or maybe your partner is universally considered like the most sensitive, caring, evolved person in your entire social circle.
Oh, the person everyone else just loves to pieces.
Yeah. And if you try to explain to anyone why you're unhappy,
Yeah.
people look at you like you're completely crazy because there's no yelling, right? There's no obvious cruelty.
No flying staplers.
Right. No explosive tantrums, no slam doors. Yet you wake up every single morning feeling just completely fundamentally drained.
It's exhausting.
It is. You feel this constant low-grade anxiety kind of thrumming in your chest or a tightness in your throat before you even check your phone. And honestly, the most confusing part of all of it, you feel uniquely incompetent.
You start believing you're the problem.
100%. You find yourself constantly apologizing for things you didn't even do, obsessively second-guessing your own memory, and just lying awake at night wondering, like, am I the toxic one here? Am I just too demanding? Am I literally losing my mind?
You know, it's the psychological equivalent of being slowly poisoned.
Yeah.
But the poison is completely tasteless, odorless, and completely invisible.
Wow. Yeah.
And the most terrifying part, the person administering it is simultaneously comforting you. They're bringing you a glass of water and telling you how deeply worried they are about your declining health.
Oh, that gives me chills.
Right. You are relying on the actual architect of your confusion to help you make sense of it.
That cognitive dissonance, that gap between the saintly mask they wear and the psychological devastation you feel inside, that's exactly what we're dismantling today.
It's so necessary.
It really is. So just as a quick background, as a clinical psychologist, I specialize in trauma bonding, personality pathology, and narcissistic structures. I spend my days sitting across from incredibly smart, capable people whose reality has been systematically dismantled brick by brick.
And they don't even see it happening.
They have no idea how it happened.
Yeah. And as a behavioral profiler, I specialize in deception analysis, coercive control, and those hidden power dynamics that operate just beneath the surface of normal human interaction.
The invisible stuff.
Exactly. My job is to look at the microbehaviors, the pauses, the syntax, the invisible transactions that reveal who actually holds the power in a room, and more importantly, how they keep you from realizing they even have it.
So to everyone listening, we are not just having a casual chat today. Consider this an elite behavioral profiling session. Our mission for this deep dive is to dissect a hidden psychological predator that hides behind the ultimate camouflage, which is vulnerability.
The covert narcissist.
The covert narcissist. We're going to give you basically a secret operating manual to decode manipulation patterns that most people remain totally blind to, sometimes for decades.
Yeah, people lose years of their lives to this.
Decades. So we're going to start at the surface layer, the observable behaviors, and descend layer by layer down into their emotional strategies, the clinical architecture of their minds, the neurobiological toll it takes on your brain.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
So fascinating. And then we'll look at the reasons why our societal systems actually protect them, and finally, the forensic strategies you need to detect them and get out.
Let's start with that surface level, layer one. Because the fundamental misconception about this personality type is exactly what keeps victims trapped in the cage.
If you don't know what you're looking for.
Right. If you're looking for the wrong predator, you will never see the one sitting right next to you.
I see this in my clinical practice every single week. A client comes in just absolutely destroyed by a marriage or a business partnership, but they vehemently deny the underlying issue. They'll say, well, he can't be a narcissist. He's so shy and self-deprecating.
He's too insecure to be a narcissist.
Exactly. Or she hates being the center of attention. She volunteers at the animal shelter. We have been completely indoctrinated by this specific stereotype. When we hear the word narcissist, we immediately picture someone loud, grandiose, and just overtly abusive.
We picture the classic, like, Wolf of Wall Street archetype, the guy screaming on a yacht.
Yes. And that conditioning comes from pop culture, but honestly, it also comes from a somewhat rigid historical interpretation of the diagnostic manuals themselves.
Oh, for sure. If you look at the DSM-5-TR, the big manual psychiatrists use, the traditional criteria for narcissistic personality disorder heavily index on visible grandiosity.
Right.
They describe someone who demands the spotlight, brags loudly, expects absolute obedience, and openly belittles people.
Which is overt narcissism.
Exactly. And it's incredibly damaging, yes, but it's highly visible. Everyone in the boardroom knows who the jerk is. You can see them coming from a mile away.
But what clinical pioneers like Dr. Eleanor Greenberg and others, what they've highlighted is the closet or covert presentation.
Yeah, the covert presentation is so much more insidious.
It is. This is a person whose underlying pathology, that core entitlement, the profound lack of empathy, the desperate need for validation and control, it is exactly the same as the loud narcissist. The
Yeah.
engine is identical.
But the chassis is different.
The chassis is completely different. They don't take up space loudly. They take up space quietly.
They take up space through suffering,
Yes.
through hypersensitivity, through this carefully curated martyrdom. Their strategy for acquiring power is entirely inverted. Instead of demanding that you admire their greatness and, bow to their superiority, they demand that you cater to their fragility.
They force you to manage their constant simmering distress.
Exactly. Let's put a magnifying glass on this and do some behavioral forensics, because we need to look at how this actually plays out in a normal environment.
That's it.
Picture an introverted, maybe slightly awkward coworker. You're in a team meeting, and they chime in with something like, I could be entirely wrong here, and I'm probably just not understanding this as well as the rest of you do, but...
Oh man, I've heard that exact phrase so many times.
Right. If we pause that moment and analyze the hidden layer, what is actually happening? From a profiling perspective, we always have to look at the function of a behavior, not just its form.
Because the form looks like humility.
Right. It looks like self-awareness.
Right.
But the function is an extraction. That is performative vulnerability. The invisible transaction taking place in that meeting room is coercion.
Coercion. That's
Yeah.
a strong word for it, but it's so true.
It is. Because by deliberately positioning themselves as self-effacing, fragile, or intellectually inferior in that exact moment, they're forcing the rest of the room into a psychological corner. You are now socially obligated to rescue them.
Right, because if you just agree with them and say, yeah, Bob, you probably are wrong, you look like an absolute monster.
Precisely. So the natural human reflex, especially for empathetic people, is to rush in and provide reassurance. You immediately say, no, your idea is great, please share it. Or, you're doing fine, you understand it perfectly.
And in that split second, they get what they want.
They have successfully extracted narcissistic supply. They just harvested validation and emotional energy from the room by weaponizing your natural empathy against you.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this is where it gets incredibly tricky for a layperson.
Sure.
As a clinician, I treat people who suffer from genuine debilitating social anxiety. I treat people with severe clinical depression whose self-esteem is genuinely shattered. And they also say things like, I could be wrong, or I'm sorry to bother you, because they truly feel burdensome.
So how do you distinguish a covert narcissist executing performative vulnerability from someone who is just deeply anxious, traumatized, or depressed? If the behavior looks identical, what's the differential diagnosis?
That is the critical question. And it's where so many people get stuck trying to, fix these individuals. The difference lies in two hidden vectors: the direction of the anxiety and the capacity for object constancy and empathy.
Okay, break that down for us.
Someone with generalized social anxiety is terrified of being judged, sure, but they still possess the capacity to recognize you as a separate human being with your own independent needs, feelings, and boundaries.
They know you exist outside of them.
Exactly. They might feel horribly awkward at a party, but they genuinely care if they're inconveniencing you. They don't want to make your night worse.
Whereas the covert narcissist's anxiety is entirely self-focused.
Entirely. They are terrified of their own flaws being exposed to the light. Their quote-unquote humility is a preemptive shield. If they criticize themselves first, you can't criticize them. That aligns perfectly with what Otto Kernberg, who is a pioneering psychiatrist in personality disorders, he calls it the narcissistic core.
Yes.
At the dead center of both the loud, overt narcissist and the quiet, covert narcissist is his profound empathy deficit. They lack genuine, effective empathy for the separate existence of other people.
You're not a real person to them.
Exactly. To a covert narcissist, you are not a fully realized three-dimensional human being with an internal world that matters. You're an appliance.
An appliance.
You are a mirror designed to reflect their worth, or you're a supporting actor in their lifelong play of martyrdom.
And here's the behavioral tell, right? What happens when you stop playing your role? If an anxious or depressed person inadvertently hurts your feelings and you bring it to their attention, their response is usually genuine remorse.
You try to fix it.
Right, they say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I was so stuck in my own head, I didn't realize I did that. They attempt to repair the rupture. But if you stop reflecting what a covert narcissist wants to see,
Or if you gently attempt to hold them accountable.
the mask of fragility slips instantly. They do not repair, they punish.
Yeah.
They punish you with passive aggression, a sudden chilling withdrawal of affection, or a punishing silent treatment.
Which brings us to the next, much darker layer. Because if their vulnerability is just camouflage, how do they actively deploy it to manipulate and control? We're moving from passive traits to active, weaponized psychological warfare.
Layer 2 and 3. Emotional strategy and hidden motivation.
And this requires a massive perspective shift for the listener. Because there is this pervasive myth that predators only prey on the weak.
Yeah, the straggler in the herd.
Right. We imagine predators looking for the naive, the broken. But covert narcissists don't usually target the weak.
No, they really don't. And if you're listening to this and feeling ashamed that you fell for it, you need to hear this. Covert narcissists target highly competent, incredibly driven, fiercely empathetic people.
The problem solvers.
The fixers, the
Yeah.
high achievers.
Why? Because driven, high-achieving people have an incredibly strong sense of internal accountability. If you tell a highly conscientious, empathetic person that they did something wrong or that they caused harm, they won't deflect.
They'll turn themselves inside out trying to fix it.
Exactly. They will obsessively interrogate their own behavior to see where they fell short. And the covert narcissist knows this. They weaponize your best traits, your deep empathy, your desire for harmony, your relentless accountability, and they turn those virtues into the very chains that bind you.
To truly understand how insidious this is, we need to do a layered case study.
Let's do it.
Let's look at a very specific dynamic, the workplace mentor. Imagine you land a job and your new boss presents as this visionary, deeply caring, emotionally intelligent leader.
They use all the right therapy buzzwords.
Oh, all of them. Servant leadership, holding space, psychological safety. You feel incredibly lucky. You sit down for a one-on-one meeting, and they say to you with this very soft, deeply concerned voice, I'm just worried about your visibility with the executive team, your approach. It just isn't quite landing with them the way we hoped. And then a week later, in a massive board meeting with all the executives present, that same boss presents a brilliant strategic initiative, an initiative that you completely conceptualized and built, but they introduce it by saying, what we have been thinking about, or a direction I've been steering the team toward.
Okay, let's freeze that frame. We need to do a line-by-line forensic breakdown of what was just said versus what was actually meant.
Let's look at the first interaction in the one-on-one. When they say, I'm just worried about your visibility, the framing is care. The packaging is mentorship. They're playing the role of your protector.
What was the invisible transaction?
The invisible transaction is destabilization. They are intentionally seeding profound doubt about your competence, your reputation, and your standing in the tribe.
Making you feel unsafe.
Exactly. They are making you feel fundamentally unsafe in your environment so that you become entirely dependent on them for guidance and translation. You start thinking, oh my God, I guess I don't understand the office politics. Thank God my boss is looking out for me.
And then the boardroom meeting. When they say, what we have been thinking about while presenting your exclusive intellectual property.
That is a classic tactic called credit theft through proximity. Yeah, and it is brilliant in a deeply toxic, predatory way.
Because it's entirely deniable. If you complain to HR or even if you confront the boss, you look petty and territorial.
The boss will just look hurt and say, I said we, I was including you. I view us as a team. I'm so sorry you feel the need to silo your ideas.
They flip it right back on you.
They flip it back. But they know exactly what they are doing. Because the executive team doesn't hear the we as a 50-50 split. The executive team hears the boss taking ownership of the intellectual capital. The boss is managing their own fragile ego by absorbing your competence while simultaneously positioning you in private as someone who is struggling and needs their protection.
And we have to emphasize that this is never a one-off event. It is an operating system. This behavior follows a highly predictable mechanical matrix known as the 5 stages of workplace devaluation.
If you are listening to this and you've lived it, you are going to experience a chilling moment of recognition right now.
You're going to realize that what you experienced was not a series of random bad days or a communication mismatch. It was a calculated cycle.
Let's walk through that cycle. Stage 1 is the golden child phase. You're hired or you start a new relationship and you are brilliant. You are the missing puzzle piece.
You're love bombed.
Yes, love bombed with praise, given special access, invited to private lunches. The covert narcissist tells you that you are exactly what they've been looking for, that everyone else on the team is a bit of a disappointment, but you get it.
Physiologically, your nervous system feels incredibly safe here. You feel a euphoric rush of validation. You drop your guard completely.
Which seamlessly transitions into stage 2, the enmeshment phase. The professional or interpersonal boundaries start to subtly blur. The covert boss starts confiding in you about their own insecurities.
Oversharing.
Right. They might share overly personal details about their marriage or start complaining to you about the incompetence of other employees. They're treating you as a peer or even a therapist.
They make you feel like you are their only trusted ally in a hostile world.
But what they're actually doing is creating a trauma bond disguised as intimacy. They're gathering data on you, learning your soft spots, and entangling your emotional state with theirs.
Then comes stage 3, the threat phase. This is the pivot. You do something that inadvertently threatens their incredibly fragile ego.
And you don't even have to insult them. You just exist outside their control.
Right. Maybe you get unsolicited, glowing praise from the CEO and the boss wasn't CC'd. Maybe you successfully set a healthy boundary, like refusing to answer emails on a Sunday. Or maybe you just demonstrate a level of independent creative competence that they simply cannot take credit for.
To a healthy manager, your independent competence is an asset. They want you to shine.
But to a covert narcissist, your independent competence is a profound existential threat to their delusion of superiority.
And that perceived threat triggers stage 4, covert devaluation. The warmth abruptly vanishes, the praise stops. Now, the concern trolling begins.
I'm just worried you're taking on too much.
I notice you seem a bit frazzled lately. They begin to subtly sabotage your workflow. They conveniently, quote-unquote, forget to CC you on vital emails, leaving you unprepared for meetings. They give you the silent treatment for days over perceived slights they won't even explain.
And most destructively, they begin upward triangulation. Let's define triangulation for the listeners because it is a core weapon. Triangulation is when someone brings a third party into a two-person dynamic to manipulate the situation, control the flow of information, or create a rivalry.
Exactly. Upward triangulation in the workplace looks like your covert boss having quiet, closed-door meetings with HR or upper management. They whisper vague, pseudo-compassionate concerns.
I love working with them, but I'm worried about their stress levels.
They've been a bit erratic lately. I'm trying to mentor them through it. They are systematically poisoning your reputation, laying the groundwork for your destruction before you even know there is a problem.
You think you are just having a rough patch. They are actively building a case against your sanity and competence.
Which leads to the final stage, stage 5, the discard or the trap. If you figure out the game, if you start documenting the abuse and try to expose them, they will immediately orchestrate your exit. They will use the groundwork they laid in stage 4 to frame you as not a culture fit, defensive, or emotionally unstable.
But, and this is almost worse, what if you don't fight back?
If you submit, if you just try harder to please them, they don't fire you. They keep you in the trap. You exist in a state of chronic, exhausting anxiety, working twice as hard to try and regain the golden approval from stage 1.
But that approval is never, ever coming back.
Never. They extract your labor, your ideas, and your emotional energy, all while ensuring you are kept too weak and confused to ever outshine them.
Wow. Hearing that cycle laid out sequentially is usually a heavy moment for people, because you literally see the matrix. But it naturally raises a profound question. If the behavior is this systematic, this predictable, and this destructive, what exactly is happening inside the mind of the covert narcissist that drives this?
Are they an evil mastermind plotting this on a whiteboard?
Right. Which takes us down to the clinical architecture of their mind. Layer 4 and 5. Power objectives and unconscious drivers.
What's going on in there?
Here is where we get into the deep psychoanalytic mechanics, and honestly, it is fascinating, but really dark. There's a shocking insight from the renowned psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut. He introduced a structural concept of the narcissistic mind called the horizontal split.
Okay, I love this concept. Explain how this differs from the loud, grandiose narcissist.
So, a grandiose narcissist has what Kohut called a vertical split. Imagine a vertical line drawn straight down the middle of their psyche. On the left side is their grandiosity. On the right side is their vulnerability and shame.
Okay.
They are aware of both sides, but they consciously oscillate. When they feel vulnerable, they aggressively and consciously overcompensate by acting grandiose.
They know they feel small, so they choose to act big to cover it up.
Exactly. But the covert narcissist's architecture is completely different. The covert narcissist has a horizontal split. Instead of a wall dividing left and right, imagine a horizontal line, like a thick concrete ceiling built across their psyche. Yes. Below that ceiling is a bottomless well of intense, agonizing shame, a deep-seated feeling of absolute worthlessness, and an unfulfilled, infantile need to be worshipped and taken care of. They have walled those feelings off, pushing them entirely out of conscious awareness.
So they don't even know it's there.
They don't. They do not consciously sit there and think, I am a deeply flawed, fragile person who needs to manipulate my coworker so I can feel superior. They actually believe their own mask. Above that horizontal split in their conscious mind, they truly believe they are a highly sensitive, uniquely moral, misunderstood martyr who is constantly unfairly victimized by a cruel, unappreciative world.
And from a behavioral profiling standpoint, understanding this horizontal split is the key to understanding why their empathy is strategic rather than genuine. Because their core self is so fragmented, so deeply unstable, they are living in a constant, exhausting state of threat detection. They monitor the emotions of the people around them hypervigilantly.
But not for your sake.
Right. They are not monitoring you because they care about your internal state. They are monitoring you to detect any subtle shift in your tone, your facial expression, or your body language that might signal a threat to their precarious self-image. They are hyper-attuned to you, but only as it relates to them. You are just a weather vane for their ego.
I want to push back on this, though, or at least explore the friction here, because this is a debate that rages constantly within clinical psychology circles and trauma recovery groups.
Yeah, the intent question.
Exactly. If this horizontal split means their deep shame is repressed, if it is an unconscious defense mechanism to protect a fractured psyche, then are they actually calculating their manipulation? Or is it just a tragic automatic reflex?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because if it's unconscious, can we really call it calculated abuse? It sounds almost like they can't help it.
And that's where the line between psychological defense mechanism and coercive control gets terrifyingly thin. As a profiler, I look at intent through the lens of action and adaptation. Here is how I see it. The entitlement is automatic.
The core feeling.
Yes, the deep-seated feeling that they deserve special treatment and that any criticism is a profound, unjust attack. That is an unconscious reflex born of their pathology. However, the tactics they use to enforce that entitlement are learned, practiced, adapted, and highly calculated.
I need you to break that down. Give me a concrete scenario showing the difference between the reflex and the tactic.
Absolutely. Let's say a covert narcissist feels a sudden pang of intense envy because a coworker they view as inferior just got a major promotion. The envy, the sudden feeling of being slighted, the internal rage, that is an automatic reflex. They didn't choose to feel that.
Right.
But choosing to quietly spread a rumor that the coworker only got the promotion because they're sleeping with the boss. Choosing to deliberately withhold critical project data from that coworker the following week to ensure they fail.
Yeah.
That's a choice. Deciding to give them the silent treatment in private while smiling warmly at them in front of the rest of the team, those are calculated, deliberate tactics of coercive control. They know what they're doing in the moment they execute the behavior.
They might rationalize it later, though.
Exactly. They may rationalize it to themselves after the fact. They might tell themselves, I'm just protecting the integrity of the team, or I'm just standing up for myself because no one else will. But the execution of the manipulation is a choice. There is no complete psychological closure here for the victim. You have to hold two conflicting truths at once. They are tragic victims of their own fragmented pathology, and they are active, deliberate perpetrators of abuse.
So if you are the target, if you are locked in this dynamic, dealing with someone who is utilizing highly adapted, calculated tactics driven by an unacknowledged bottomless well of shame, what actually happens to you? We need to look at layer 6, the neurobiological toll on the victim.
Because understanding the architecture of the predator is only half the equation. We have to look at what happens to the nervous system, the actual brain matter of the person trapped in the cage with them.
And this is where we see a major, necessary perspective shift in how we view emotional abuse. Most people assume that if you're being treated poorly at work or in a bad relationship, your self-esteem simply drops. You feel sad. You feel undervalued.
Just a bad day at the office.
Right. But the damage inflicted by a covert narcissist goes so far beyond standard low self-esteem. It is a complete unraveling of the self, Highly successful, driven women and men will sit on my couch and say, I think I've developed severe imposter syndrome. I used to be so sharp, and now I just don't feel confident in my decisions anymore. I can't even write a simple email without second-guessing every word.
And it's not imposter syndrome at all.
It's not. As we unpack the timeline of their relationship or their employment, the revelation hits them. Imposter syndrome is an internal feeling of inadequacy despite external proof of success. What they are experiencing is a physiological trauma response to chronic reality distortion.
Let's profile the difference in the victim's experience between overt and covert abuse. If an overt narcissist yells at you, throws a file on your desk and says, "You are stupid, this work is garbage, you are less than me," the damage is clear, the boundaries violently breached, you feel angry, you know they are out of line.
You can point to the broken rule.
But a covert narcissist doesn't do that. The covert narcissist looks at the file, sighs heavily, rubs their temples, and says, "I'm so disappointed. I thought we shared the same standard of excellence. I guess I'll just have to redo this myself this weekend." They weaponize guilt, obligation, and concern. This causes a phenomenon that philosophers and trauma psychologists call epistemic damage.
Epistemic damage. Let's define that clearly for the listeners. Epistemology is the philosophical study of knowledge, how we know what we know, how we determine what is true. Epistemic damage means the victim's actual mechanism for determining truth is broken. You lose trust in your own perceptual reality.
You no longer trust your own ability to know what is real.
Because the covert narcissist is constantly, seamlessly moving the goalposts and reframing history.
You bring up a conversation from yesterday where they explicitly told you to do X. You did X. Now they are upset. You say, "But yesterday you told me to do this." And they don't scream at you. They look at you with genuine, gentle pity and say, "That's not what happened at all. I never said that. I think you're projecting. Are you feeling okay? You've been very stressed and forgetful lately."
It's so destabilized.
When this happens day after day, week after week, your brain cannot reconcile the data. It literally begins to alter its functioning to survive the cognitive dissonance.
Let's talk about the neurobiology of that, because this isn't just a metaphor. This is biological. Chronic exposure to gaslighting, framed as care, actively compromises the brain's prefrontal cortex.
The logic center.
Your prefrontal cortex is the rational, evolutionary, advanced part of your brain responsible for executive function, decision-making, reality testing, and context-keeping. But when you are in an environment of constant, unpredictable emotional threat, and remember, to your nervous system, a passive-aggressive sigh, a withheld email, or a sudden cold shoulder is processed as a survival threat, your amygdala takes over.
The amygdala being the brain's primal fear and alarm center.
Exactly. The amygdala floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your nervous system gets stuck in a state of low-grade, chronic threat detection. You become hypervigilant, constantly scanning their mood, trying to predict the next invisible landmine.
And what does that do over time?
Over time, this chronic flood of stress hormones literally degrades the synaptic connections in the prefrontal cortex. The brain fog you feel, the inability to remember details, the paralyzing indecision, it is not because you are weak. It's because your prefrontal cortex is structurally struggling to process information.
Wow.
It is constantly being told by the person you trust that its read on reality is wrong. This shrinking of your professional or personal identity is a neurological injury. You're experiencing complex PTSD from sustained coercive control.
You need to define complex PTSD here because it's vital. Standard PTSD usually stems from a single acute terrifying event, a car crash, a combat situation. Complex PTSD, or CPTSD, stems from chronic, inescapable, repeated psychological trauma over months or years, where the victim feels utterly trapped, the slow drip of poison.
Which brings up a profoundly disturbing question, bringing us to layer 7. Systemic enablement. If this abuse is so devastating, if it causes literal neurological injury, epistemic damage, and CPTSD, why doesn't the system stop it?
It's infuriating.
Why doesn't human resources step in and fire them? Why doesn't the extended family unit or the religious community or the friend group immediately excommunicate this person?
Because the system is entirely rigged to protect them. And this is a massive revelation for victims who feel like the whole world has turned against them. I call this systemic flaw the calmness trap.
The calmness trap.
This trap is built into the architecture of almost every corporate hierarchy, institutional bureaucracy, and even family court system. Organizations and social systems heavily, almost exclusively, reward the appearance of composure. Emotion is viewed as a liability. Calmness is viewed as credibility.
And the covert narcissist uses that rulebook to hang you.
Exactly. The covert narcissist operates entirely via plausible deniability. Subtle, invisible boundary crossings. Microaggressions that are impossible to prove on paper. They poke you under the table. They poke and they poke and they poke for months. They withhold information. They exclude you from meetings. They offer backhanded compliments.
And then eventually, your nervous system can't take it anymore. You snap.
You snap. The victim, whose amygdala has been hijacked and pushed to the absolute brink, finally reacts. You raise your voice in the hallway. You send a frustrated, capitalized, overly emotional email. You burst into tears during a team meeting. And in that exact fraction of a second, the trap springs shut.
Because how does the covert narcissist react?
They don't yell back. They remain perfectly, chillingly calm. They lean back in their chair, look at the rest of the group with wide, innocent eyes and say, "Wow, I'm just trying to have a constructive dialogue about the project. I had no idea you were so reactive. Do you need to take a walk?"
Oh my God, it is maddening. I can feel my own blood pressure rising just describing it.
The system, whether it's HR, the CEO, or the family matriarch, looks at the interaction. They see one calm, rational person and one highly dysregulated, crying, angry person. And the system immediately, lazily identifies the dysregulated person as the problem. The abuser successfully outsourced their own pathology onto you and made you look crazy in the process.
Dr. Jennifer Freyd, a brilliant researcher on trauma, coined a term for this secondary trauma: institutional betrayal. Institutional betrayal occurs when the institution you trust to protect you fails to do so, or actively enables the harm.
Which is almost worse than the original abuse.
It compounds the original psychological injury with a second, often much deeper wound. Imagine the courage it takes to finally go to HR. You bring your meticulous notes, you explain the gaslighting, the credit theft, and the HR representative looks at you, tilts their head, and says, "It sounds like you two just have a communication mismatch. Have you tried assuming positive intent? He's a very highly regarded manager. Maybe you're just struggling with his high standards."
The institution inflicts that second injury because the covert abuser manages upward brilliantly. They are supplying the CEO, the board, or the HR director with exactly what those entities want: compliance, flattery, and the frictionless appearance of smooth operations.
There is also a massive societal implication here regarding gender dynamics that we cannot ignore. We have to look at how this pathology weaponizes modern culture. Over the last few decades, society has rightly pushed to create space for emotional intelligence. We want leaders and partners to be emotionally expressive, vulnerable, and fluent in the language of therapy.
But the covert narcissist weaponizes this progressive coding.
Oh, entirely.
You see this constantly in modern profiling, particularly in dating and progressive workplaces. The sensitive, emotionally articulate, covert male narcissist is a terrifyingly effective predator. He will use the exact language of therapy. He will talk about his boundaries, about being triggered, about holding space, to appear incredibly safe, evolved, and feminist. But he uses that exact language to subtly destroy the credibility of driven female colleagues or partners.
I've seen this play out in couples therapy. The woman naturally becomes frustrated by his relentless passive aggression, his covert financial sabotage, or his refusal to carry mental load. And when she expresses that frustration, her completely justified anger is weaponized against her using therapy speak.
"You're violating my boundaries."
Yes, he will calmly say, "Your tone is violating my boundaries," or "I feel like you're gaslighting my experience." She's labeled as emotionally unstable, too aggressive, or difficult, while he is protected by his calm, sensitive, progressive facade. Her virtues, her passion, her drive, her emotional investment in the relationship become the very vector of the harm.
It is a perfect, terrifying storm of individual psychological pathology meeting systemic enablement. But we cannot leave you, the listener, sitting in the dark feeling powerless. That is not the mission of this deep dive.
No, definitely not.
Now that you can see the invisible matrix, now that you understand the mechanics of the trap, we have to talk about how you survive it, how you detect it, and how you escape. We need to descend to our final focus, layer 8, survival forensics and detection.
Because you need to know how to spot them before they hook you, whether that's in an interview or on a first date. And you need to know how to minimize the damage and get out if you are already locked in the cage.
Let's start with spotting them in the wild. If you are hiring for a company, looking for a business partner, or going on a date, how do you bypass the mask? Covert narcissists often excel in interviews and early dating phases because they project this calm, thoughtful, deeply attentive demeanor. They mirror you perfectly.
The chameleons.
They really are. But as a profiler, I use elite interrogation tactics disguised as casual, polite conversation. The single most powerful tool you have in a job interview or a first date is asking a variation of this question. Tell me about a time you made a significant mistake, or a time a major conflict was actually your fault.
Okay, but that sounds like a standard interview question. Everyone asks, what's your biggest weakness? What are we specifically listening for that reveals the pathology?
You are listening for the absence of genuine accountability and the presence of three specific tells. An authentic, healthy person will answer that question factually. They will say, 2 years ago, I completely messed up the timeline on a product launch. I didn't factor in supply chain delays. It cost the company money. Here's what I learned, and here's the system I built to ensure I never do it again.
It is objective. It is accountable.
But the covert narcissist cannot tolerate the shame of true fault. They will do one of three things. First, minimization of fault. They will say, I overlooked a tiny detail, but honestly, the marketing team didn't give me the brief on time, so my hands were tied. They immediately deflect to blame.
Got it. What's the second tell?
Focus on external barriers, framed as a heroic struggle. The company's systems were just so archaic and everyone else was so resistant to change. I made a mistake by pushing too hard, but I did the best I could under impossible, toxic circumstances. They reframe the mistake to make themselves the hero fighting a flawed system.
Wow, turning a mistake into a brag. And the third tell, the most dangerous one.
Performative victimhood. This is the ultimate red flag. They will answer the question about their mistake by talking entirely about their emotional suffering. They will say, making that mistake was just so devastating for me. I lost sleep for weeks. I felt so let down by the whole process. It really broke my trust in the team.
Notice what just happened.
The entire premise of the question, their accountability for an error that impacted others, was instantly twisted into a narrative about their emotional victimhood. It is always ultimately entirely about them.
That is profound. If you hear that on a date or in an interview, run. But what if running isn't an immediate option? What if you are already in it? What if this is your direct supervisor, your co-parent, or a family member you have to see at Thanksgiving? You can't simply walk away tomorrow. We have to talk about the psychological survival tool known as the gray rock method.
Gray rocking is a foundational defensive posture in dark psychology and coercive control survival. The goal is exactly what it sounds like, to become as emotionally uninteresting, unresponsive, and boring as a gray rock sitting on the ground.
Because they feed on your reactions.
Exactly. A covert narcissist feeds on your emotional reactions.
Yeah.
Your anger, your desperate attempts to explain yourself, your tears, your guilt, your frantic emails. That is all narcissistic supply. It proves to them that they have power over you. When you gray rock, you strategically cut off the supply pipeline.
Let's role play what this actually looks like. If I'm the covert boss and I walk up to your desk and say, I saw the report you submitted. I mean, it's fine. It's just what I thought you were more detail-oriented than this. I guess my expectations were too high. The old you, the empathetic you, would panic and say, oh my gosh, what's wrong with it? I'll fix it right now. Please tell me what I missed. How does the gray rock version of you respond?
The gray rock version of me doesn't look up from the keyboard immediately. I take a slow breath. I look up with a completely blank, neutral expression. I speak in a flat, monotone voice, and I say, I understand you are disappointed. If you'd like to leave specific edits on the draft, I will implement them. And then I look back at my screen.
It is brilliant because there is nothing for them to grab onto. But, and this is a massive warning, that general internet advice often completely misses, gray rocking comes with severe, predictable risks. It is not a magic shield that makes them go away peacefully. From a behavioral standpoint, what happens when a predator suddenly loses their primary food source?
They escalate wildly.
Right.
When you cut off a covert narcissist supply, you trigger a psychological phenomenon called an extinction burst. When a behavior that previously yielded a reward suddenly stops working, the subject will intensify the behavior dramatically before giving up. They may escalate tactically.
Like what?
In a workplace, if you stop reacting to their passive aggression, they might start actively stalling your projects. They might isolate you from the team or attempt to provoke a massive public reaction from you just to spring that calmness trap we talked about earlier. Or, alternatively, they will employ a tactic called hoovering.
Hoovering, like the vacuum cleaner.
Exactly like the vacuum cleaner. They will try to suck you back into the enmeshment phase. They will suddenly, jarringly drop all the passive aggression and hit you with a massive wave of love bombing.
You're my best employee. I couldn't do this without you.
Right. They will offer warm public praise. They will invite you to collaborate on a highly visible special project. Or, most insidiously, they will invent a personal crisis, a sudden mysterious illness, a family tragedy, a profound depressive episode.
To exploit your empathy.
Yes. They know you are a fixer, so they present a problem that only you can fix. You have to anticipate this escalation. You must view gray rocking as a short-term, tactical survival mechanism to preserve your sanity while you aggressively build your exit strategy behind the scenes. It is not a long-term solution for your psychological health because repressing your own emotions constantly is exhausting.
And while you were building that exit strategy, the internal cognitive antidote to their manipulation is learning a simple acronym. Never JDE. Do not justify, argue, defend, or explain.
This is one of the hardest habits to break for empathetic people. Why is JD so dangerous with these specific personality types?
Because you are operating under the assumption that you are communicating with a rational person who shares your goal of mutual understanding. To a normal, healthy person, if you explain your boundary or justify your action, they understand it. They say, oh, I see where you're coming from. But to a covert narcissist, mutual understanding is not the goal. Power is the goal.
Power is always the goal.
Therefore, every justification you offer, every argument you make, every frantic 5-paragraph email you send to defend your character is just raw data. It is ammunition. They will take your defense, surgically extract a single sentence out of context, twist it, and use it to prove that you are the one who is irrational, defensive, or incompetent.
Let's do another quick forensics on this. If your boss says, I'm disappointed you didn't anticipate the supply chain problem, and you, JDE, you say, but I sent you 3 emails last week warning you about it. You never replied. How's this my fault? What just happened?
You just gave them exactly what they want, an emotional defensive reaction. You look panicked, they look calm, they will simply reply, there is no need to raise your voice. I'm just looking for solutions and you're hyper-fixating on the past. This defensive attitude is exactly what I was worried about. They win.
Instead, you deploy the anti-JD. You state the fact neutrally. You say, the supply chain data is documented in the emails from last Tuesday. I will resend them now to the entire team for clarity. It is neutral. It is factual. It is entirely void of emotional supply. You do not ask for their understanding. You do not ask for their validation. You state reality and you disengage.
And that concept of stating reality brings us to the most crucial step of healing. Ultimately, rebuilding your shattered self-trust, repairing that profound epistemic damage to your brain cannot happen in isolation. And it rarely happens while you are still deeply enmeshed inside the narcissist's sphere of influence.
You need a tether to the real world.
You have to actively anchor your reality externally. You need a trusted colleague who works in a different department. You need a trauma-informed therapist. You need a mentor. You need a friend who doesn't know the abuser. You need someone whose brain has not been compromised by the gaslighting to look at your documentation, listen to your experience, and say, no, you are not crazy. That was incredibly manipulative. That actually happened.
Because the covert narcissist has spent months, maybe years, ensuring that their distorted version of you feels more real to you than your own version of yourself. The escape plan isn't just about handing in a resignation letter or signing divorce papers. The true exit strategy is about reclaiming your sovereignty over your own mind. It is about taking back the pen and writing your own reality again.
Which brings us to our final synthesis. We have traveled a massive psychological distance today. We started at the surface level confusion, that lingering, agonizing question of, why do I feel so constantly drained around this seemingly nice, sensitive pose?
The grand illusion.
We descended through the clinical realities of the horizontal split, unmasking the bottomless well of shame that drives their behavior. We explored the devastating neurobiology of complex trauma and the literal degradation of your prefrontal cortex. We exposed the systemic failures of HR and the societal calmness trap. And finally, we armed you with the tactical necessity of gray rocking and the absolute rule of never defending yourself to a predator.
If you have been listening to this and recognizing your own life in these examples, you have likely transitioned through a spectrum of emotions over the last hour. From curiosity to a creeping suspicion to a sickening sense of recognition, and hopefully arriving right now at a clarifying, empowering realization.
You are not crazy. You are not fundamentally incompetent. You are not too sensitive. You were targeted. And you were targeted precisely because of your brilliance, your high capacity, your deep empathy, and your relentless drive.
The traits they systematically tried to dismantle and destroy in you are the exact traits they completely lack and desperately envy. The entire mechanism of their control relies completely on your willingness to take responsibility for their pathology. They need you to carry their shame.
But you don't have to anymore.
No. Once you realize this, once you put that burden down and stop taking responsibility for their emotional regulation, their invisible matrix collapses entirely.
And as we close this investigation, I want to leave you with a chilling yet deeply empowering psychological reality to mull over. When victims first realize they are dealing with a covert narcissist, they often fantasize about justice.
Yeah, the grand exposure.
Right. We think that a narcissist's greatest fear is being exposed. We think they are terrified that we will gather all the evidence, stand up in a crowded room, and dramatically reveal them to the world to be the monster they truly are. But as clinicians and profilers know, that isn't their deepest fear at all.
Not even close.
Because even if you call them a monster, even if you are screaming at them in hatred, you are still reacting to them. You are still organizing your emotional life around them. You are still giving them significance and supply.
Their deepest, most terrifying existential fear is not that you will expose them as a monster. Their greatest fear is that you will simply find them irrelevant.
Exactly.
Hmm.
When you truly heal, when you reclaim your reality and step entirely out of their illusion, they don't become a terrifying monster to you anymore. They just become a very small, very broken, deeply tragic person who has absolutely no impact on your life, your choices, or your nervous system.
And when you achieve that profound level of irrelevance, their invisible power vanishes into thin air.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive investigation. It is never easy to look closely at the darker, hidden mechanics of human behavior, especially when it hits so close to home. But awareness is the first, the most critical, and the most permanent step towards psychological immunization. Trust your gut. It is smarter than you think. Document your reality. Protect your empathy. And remember, the exit door from the grand illusion is always unlocked the very moment you decide to turn the handle. Take care of your nervous systems out there, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.